is Ohio Link. This is my thesis. My second story, a modicum of pathos. Like I told you, regalia is kind of three stories, and then there's a few short stories. Um, the first one is kind of about leaving New York. This is about New York and my advertising career. Um, it's if the first one was about 10% nonfiction, this one's about 40%. So a modicum of pathos. Um, it was his 37th birthday, and Jonathan Schiff tapped on a table at Building on Bond, a glass of Guinness in hand. Jonathan's bronze countenance had set of engraved eyebrows. His eyes followed the sea green pipes from the mahogany bar to the ceiling. Lenny Slice appeared in a doorless frame carrying a tray of mac and cheese and grilled asparagus. He smiled at Beth Shapiro before turning into the library, a room filled by a Spartan sense of humor with the television set that didn't work. Beth finished emptying the breakfast case, rolled up the sleeves on her flannel shirt, and darted her eyes around Jonathan. She was preparing for another Thursday night, perhaps a Highland Scotch tour for a stage manager from BAM, a couple of regulars stuffing themselves for a night of Johnny Cash to herself. Behind Jonathan, a parched blind was halfway down from the ceiling. Outside, a robin flew from the cinnamon roof to a hopscotch scort porch. Across an iron fence, the hydrangeas swayed. 4 years ago, Jonathan received a job offer to be director of research in an advertising agency called Skylark. He began making enough money to feel comfortable spending it and moved to a fourth floor walk up right above. It was incredibly ambitious time in the life of a young professional, but Jonathan wasn't able to make any new friends. Growing up, the culture cast a line. Friends appeared out of nowhere and they were everywhere. Whereas in professional life, it was the opposite. Worse, in the hapless turn, his friends from school released him, each in their own way, and the associated memories slipped into thin air. Poof! Or still worse, the declension had been part of their plan all along. Jonathan retreated a desolate Parthenon and for a while lost the ability to enjoy eye contact. He spent most of the free time at Building on Bond on the weekends. He played pool at the ultra shiny and old timey Brooklyn Inn. He tested conventions by adding seltzer to his espresso at Rucola. Skylark was not on oops. Skylark was on the ninth and 10th floor of a brick building on the 20 on 24th Street closer to 6th Avenue than 5th Avenue. Charles Woolrich, a man with soft blonde hair who wore Van Hussein shirts and plaid tennis shoes, the chief technology officer, his boss, was responsible for the second phase to use gains from Skylark and automation to conjoin operations with media sales. Charles was in his 50s but looked younger than Jonathan. He had earned a reticence in conversation as one often mistook. When he was excited, for he was often angry. Charles gave Jonathan a filter feeding accountability and an office with a rocking chair, three computer screens, and a shelf to store binders. Jonathan scoured PubMed, Bujo, and BLS and New York Times archives, did research on the four color theorem and the dating mechanism in our world in data, and used seven habits of highly successful people and the seven steps in preliminary research on US patents as a reference guide. After a year and a half, Jonathan met a girl on Bumble named Dirda Sinju. Dirda lived on the Upper West Side and worked as a comics artist in Midtown. She had smooth skin, black watery eyes, and a waffle iron smile like Minnie Mouse or Daffy Duck. Deirdre, a native to New Yorker, was taken by Jonathan's interpretation of the city, and Jonathan admired that she was itinerant. They began going out every Sunday afternoon, either in Manhattan or Brooklyn, building a consistency of dates that was a bit naive, even nerve wracking. Indeed, it was odd to start the week in the other parts of town, rather disorienting but hopeful. One feared both shared was the silent suffering of the morning commute. Men, women, and children so tightly assembled on the 2 or Q train that you couldn't help but wonder upon a giant monster, such as the Ubermensch, with a partner. The Ubermensch is in Nietzsche's Twilight of the Idols. It's The idea that man can conjoin as a transformer and perhaps become indestructible, immortal, hopeless, and happy. With a partner, the anxiety lulled, but only until a conception of romance took its place. Still, a new commute freshened the view in the mirror and slightly raised the eyebrows. A higher quality of life, a lower rent. Deirdre came to prefer her mornings in Borum Hill, but perhaps she knew all along a line was drawn, and one she had drawn. When I came across Jonathan, I had already seen my mother's ruby. I went down our short driveway to check for mail as I had grown accustomed. The summer of 1989. It was my work's day. I did not ask why, wonder why about the bills, but I did receive a letter from Grandma Ellen. There were two pigeons, at first hopping in a roundabout, flying and settling, nodding and poking, prodding and waiting. The pigeons were naked, and so was I. They began again as they had first been, and I heard chanting. I noticed their feet looked like pestles that tied on top of Grandma Ellen's casserole. It was on time. They began to watch me as well, so I lifted my hands and opened them at the neck. At least Jonathan had Elizabeth Shapiro, a spelling mistake that I published. A bartender at Building on Bond, another mistake that I published. Beth's face was torn in frayed alabaster, brown hair cut white, her body a comfortable bicycle sheet. She lived in Bushwick, henceforth not to be confused with Williamsburg. Jonathan and Beth's inside joke turned out not an inside joke so much as an inscrutable statement, a chance to think twice, though it had the feeling of exclusivity. When someone new sat at the bar,